Super Metroid, an iconic game that many refer to as not only the peak of the Metroid series, but the pinnacle of the Metroidvania genre itself. From its beautiful pixel art to the unforgettable soundtrack and level design still referenced by developers today, the legacy and influence of Super Metroid cannot be understated. But while I could go on and on about this legendary game, I'm here to talk about just a small part of it, the introduction to the game. An introduction that has sent chills down the spines of millions since the game released in 1994. An introduction that still sends chills down my spine to this very day, despite having played and beaten the game countless times over the past couple of decades. So join me, won't you, as I walk us through what makes this introduction so historic and why for many, it still stands as one of the greatest openings in video game history, even to this day. But first, I feel a little bit of context is in order, specifically the perception of what a Nintendo game was in the early 1990s. By late 1993, you had games like Tetris, Super Mario World, Kirby's Adventure, Super Mario Kart, and The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past at the forefront of what it meant to be a Nintendo game. These were all highly innovative games that pushed the video game medium forward. That said, many of these Nintendo titles shared a similar visual style and overall tone. Yes, these titles featured superb and varied gameplay, but on the surface, most Nintendo releases from this era shared a bright, colorful, pixel art aesthetic with few moments of dread or horror injected into them. While some games had their fair share of suspenseful moments, such as the ghost houses in Super Mario World, the dungeons in Zelda: A Link to the Past, and even large portions of the original Metroid and Metroid 2, nothing in Nintendo's prior catalog could have prepared you for this in 1994. The music building up to the title drop, the haunting sight of bodies littering the scene, all culminating into that iconic shot of the Metroid in the containment capsule with the music now at the forefront of the scene. This introduction was such a massive tonal shift for what a Nintendo game was at the time, and I would argue it's still an outlier among their catalog to this day. Even the original Metroid has a more upbeat introduction compared to Super Metroid's. And while Metroid 2 definitely establishes an eerie vibe with its ear-piercing melody hitting the player in brief waves, it just can't compare to Super Metroid's title drop. Every time I start up Super Metroid, this intro isn't optional, it's mandatory. At the time, there was no opening as effective at establishing a mood on the Super Nintendo. I would go so far as to say there was nothing like it at all on any other video game platform at the time. But this is just the introductory cutscene when you boot up Super Metroid. We haven't even technically started the game, yet already a tone is firmly established. So with the context of Super Metroid's introduction properly laid out, let's start the game and see where it actually takes us.
The last Metroid is in captivity. The galaxy is at peace.
We begin with a first-person narration from Samus describing the events of Metroid 1 and 2. First with text, and then with small recreations of key events that played out in the previous two games with Super Metroid's game engine. If you played the previous two games before Super, then you'll notice right off the bat how improved the graphics are. Samus explains to us how after storming the planet of Zebes and defeating the space pirates and their leader, Mother Brain, she was then hired by the Galactic Federation to eliminate the entire Metroid species on their homeworld of SR-388, out of fear that they could be weaponized again by the space pirates or another hostile force. So traveling to SR-388, Samus does just that. except for a single larva that hatches before her eyes. Unable to bring herself to kill it, she instead takes it with her off-world to Sarah's space colony, a research station. There, she leaves the baby Metroid with the many scientists and researchers who work there. Believing that they can back-engineer the Metroid's natural energy-draining abilities for the betterment of galactic peace, Samus leaves the station. However, not long after leaving, she receives a distress call from Cirrus saying that the station has come under attack. Not hesitating for a moment, Samus guns it back to the colony to try and save the researchers. We arrive and control is finally given to the player, but something is clearly wrong. There's no music and there's no one around. Only the cold hum of electronics and light machinery fill the halls of Sarah's station. We travel to the bottom of the elevator shaft and continue through a few more rooms, until we arrive in the same room the game opened with. While not quite as eerie as it was before, seeing as how this is our second time experiencing it, it is still unsettling nonetheless. After leaving the main research lab and walking down a barren hallway, Samus enters a seemingly empty room until she spots the baby Metroid still restrained in its inner capsule container lying on the floor. Approaching it, one thing becomes clear. It's not just the two of them in the room. Ridley appears and begins to do battle with our bounty hunter. Now this is the first combat encounter in the game, and Samus is extremely vulnerable. She only has 99 energy and has no major upgrades. Ridley, on the other hand, is fast and takes up a good portion of the room. He swings his tail erratically, and getting hit by this does 15 damage to Samus alone. On top of this, he regularly tries to tackle you and shoots fireballs from his mouth. For the vast majority of players, they're going to lose this fight, but the game is expecting this to happen. You see, once Samus's health is below 30, Ridley will decide to swipe the baby Metroid and fly away. As he does this, he sets off a timed explosive, forcing Samus to race back to her gunship and evacuate the colony before it obliterates the station. But there's actually another way for this encounter to play out. If you manage to keep your energy above 30 and can shoot Ridley 100 times, you can actually win the fight. Doing this will cause Ridley to do the same as before. Grab the baby Metroid and set off the timed explosive, forcing Samus to evacuate. For experienced players who know Super Metroid inside and out, this is a challenging yet fun way to put a fresh spin on the very first boss fight of the game. And while you typically wouldn't do this for your first playthrough, or if you're speedrunning the game, it's nonetheless a very cool addition that adds another layer of choice to the player. Do you take enough damage and trigger the countdown on the bomb as normal, or do you attempt the much harder route of defeating Ridley? Whichever you choose, the beast snags the baby and sets off the timed explosive, forcing Samus to race back to her ship. As she makes her escape, the station seemingly begins to crumble around her. Tiles fall from the ceiling, the station shakes erratically, and the music is intentionally hectic. All of this being a stark contrast to our first expedition down the halls of Cirrus, and foreshadowing the final escape sequence at the end of the game. After entering the main shaft where the player first gained control of Samus, we begin to make our way back to the top of the room where the elevator is. The room sways back and forth rather aggressively in a very impressive display for the Super Nintendo hardware. If you wait too long in this area, it can actually be pretty difficult to reach the top of the room because of how far the playable area gets pushed off screen. But assuming you're quick enough, Samus makes it back to the top of the elevator and manages to board her ship and evacuate the colony just in time before the bomb goes off. From here, she heads towards her former home of Zebes in pursuit of Ridley and to rescue the baby Metroid before the space pirates can fully unlock its potential as a bioweapon. Super Metroid's first few moments are extremely captivating for a few different reasons. As stated earlier, just the boot up cutscene when you begin the game is extremely effective at setting a mood and gripping the player from the get-go. Not only are you caught off guard by how sudden and intense it is, but already the game entices you to start asking questions. Where is this place? What happened here? From the moment you begin Super Metroid, most players are already going to be intrigued with the game's premise, not to mention captivated by how eerie the opening is. Once you properly begin the game, the story actually takes center stage as Samus gives her narration. For as excellent as the environmental storytelling is in Super Metroid, Samus's narration actually stands as a stark contrast to the rest of the game. While the majority of the game has minimal cutscenes, little to no dialogue, and no objective markers, Samus's narration is direct, leaves little room for interpretation, and unskippable, forcing the player to engage the game in a singular way. Compare this to the rest of Super Metroid, which allows for experimentation and gives the player more than one way to make progress in the game. While I do wish it was possible to skip Samus's dialogue upon finishing the game for the first time, I believe opening with the narration was the right move. Not only is it a solid recap of the first two Metroid titles that adds some new context to them, but it also adds an excellent setup for the adventure that's about to take place. After Samus arrives at Sierra's space colony, the game does what it does best, showing and not telling the story. You're alone, bodies litter the main research room. Ridley makes a sudden appearance and your first boss fight of the game begins, and then a thrilling escape. Again, this is in stark contrast to the narration sequence we experienced just minutes before. From here on in, Super Metroid tells its story purely through player experience, and with no dialogue or lore dumps. There are games that do the bulk of their stories through text and are still extremely compelling, like Resident Evil with its files, or even the Metroid Prime series with its logbook entries. But with Super Metroid, it really is impressive how effective the game is at telling its story with minimal dialogue and cutscenes. And the introduction, narration aside, foreshadows how the rest of the game will tell its tale. It's perfect in my eyes not only because of how it sets up the rest of the journey, but because of how captivating it all is the moment you boot up the game. Even after 30 years, Super Metroid continues to act as a template for many developers on how to capture players' imaginations from the moment they press start. The game itself will continue to inspire for generations to come, but I hope after watching this video you have a better understanding on how Super Metroid manages to pull players into its world from the very beginning, and why, even decades later, it continues to inspire. Thank you everybody for checking out the video. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.